Sego, it is January 26, 2018. I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network. Streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet, or you can find us right here on Facebook. We are Facebook live streaming as we do with every show, and you can find us Facebook live streaming on my two group pages, which is Let's Talk Native with John Kane and Let's Talk with John Kane on WBAI, and my wife is home diligently sharing this show on various other group pages throughout Facebook. So if you stumble across us, stop by and take a look and take a listen. You may learn something, and you may certainly learn a perspective that you may not have heard before or may not be aware of. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who is manning our cameras and our soundboard. The camera is for our Facebook live stream, but it's also for our videos that will go onto our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, and that way you'll get notifications for any new videos that we put up, videos of our shows and other videos that we produce from time to time. Our studio engineer is Kelly McMillan, and I want to thank her for her fine work in with our setup. Our opening song was Jeff Doreen, Grunyolage, doing a Mohawk version, or a Gunyogeha version, of Across the Universe. Some powerful stuff there, and it just shows you the versatility of our language and the versatility of so much that has gone into not just our language, but our culture and trying to understand various concepts. And I'm going to talk a little bit about something kind of near and dear to a lot of Senecas, because it is something that is a very prevalent activity here in Seneca territory, although it's certainly not exclusive to Seneca territory. I'm going to talk about snow snake. And I'm going to talk about it not as a somebody who's proficient at it. I'm not a snow snake player or a competitor, but I understand things about the game as it relates to life, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So that's what I plan to talk about. A couple of things I wanted to get into even before I do that, but that's the gist of what the show is going to be talking about. We're going to talk about snow snake and the metaphor that it is for the Gayanara Goa, the metaphor that it is for governance, for rights, responsibility, for authority. And so we're going to talk about some of those things. But before I do that, I got to tell you a story about a gentleman that I've gotten to be friends with over the years. A gentleman who is Ganaka Maoli. He's native Hawaiian. And he's somebody who has been on the front lines of so many events, I guess, not just protests or demonstrations, but the very act of trying to protect certain aspects of Hawaii, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian sovereignty, advancing the sovereignty movement, the restoration or the full acknowledgement of the Hawaiian kingdom. And this is a friend of mine. His name is and I may butcher his name, so but it's Kelikoa Kaeo. And he's been arrested for some of the demonstrations, and some of it ends up being like disturbance of the peace or blocking access to a sidewalk. Some of the real rudimentary things that we find ourselves getting charged with like a trespass or something like that. I mean, some of the stuff that's familiar to all of us. But this is a guy who's doing this in his homelands of in the Hawaiian Islands. So he gets arrested, and then he gets arrested again. And the second thing that he gets arrested, I mean, the charges, again, are these misdemeanor charges. But then he gets held almost in contempt of court. I guess it was actually in contempt of court, and gets arrested for refusal to speak English. He insisted on speaking his native tongue, Hawaiian, and he was arrested for it. He had a judge actually, try to force him to speak English. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating because if there's one thing that we know as Native people, and especially Native people who not only speak the language but are aware of the intricacies of the language and the way some things don't translate easily. And I'm not going to say they don't translate. I mean, everything translates. But there are very few languages, unless they're very, very related, like Latin languages, where you can essentially translate almost word for word, a word for a word, or a short phrase for a short phrase. Sometimes you need more of a description of that, of things. I mean, we use words that we call that in our language in Gonyogeha or Seneca or whatever, a word that we might translate to uncle, but it doesn't necessarily mean uncle. It doesn't mean the child of my brother or the son of my brother or the son of my sister. When we use the word uncle, we mean it in a broader way. The word for grandfather doesn't mean your mother or father's father. It's more descriptive about him and what he sees in you and the relationship between each other. So when we talk about how a word literally translates versus the way we use it in our culture or in our day-to-day day-to-day table talk, if you will. So things get lost. So this very idea, if you do possess your language and you do understand that there are certain things that if you say them in your language, even with a translator in the room translating it, what you're trying to say, you can always say, that's not what I said. You can say, that's not what the words translate to. Loosely, you're trying to capture the idea, but specifically, you can get into some of the intricacies. So when we speak in our language, it's more accurate because it's representing where we are coming from on these various positions, including things like protecting the land. I mean, there's not going to be anything in English that's going to correlate to the legality of desecrating our lands. So when we speak in our language, and whether it's Native Hawaiian or whether it's Gonyogeha or whatever, Mohawk, Seneca, whatever we're speaking in, it is going to be different when we can use words that were crafted by people who came long, long before us. So I just absolutely applaud, and it turns out, I from what I understand, they dropped the arrest warrant on the language thing after several days. But just the very idea, I mean, when we talk about colonization, when we talk about this, the very aspect of being forced, of forced assimilation, forced indoctrination, there can be no clearer example than a Native person entering into a court of law, insisting on speaking his language, and a language that in Hawaii is still it's still considered an official language. So it's not like they shouldn't have been able to find somebody who could have translated. The fact that they were unwilling to do it to the point that they would actually charge Kaleko with a contempt of court. I mean, I would have contempt for that court. So I mean, I just want to tell that little story, and you can find it. I've got some of those. It's posted on my group page, on my Let's Talk Native group page. If you look down through, you can find the story. It's kind of fascinating, and the whole idea of it is what I find somewhat amazing. And it's again, it's it's a crazy situation. So anyway, let me get back. Before I get too far, let me introduce you. Come on over just a little bit. Lean into the camera. I've got my grandson in studio here, so I want to say hello to Leston. Leston, look at the camera. Say wait to the camera. Right. That's my grandson Leston, who, for the last couple of weeks, he said, "Hey, can I come in the studio with you? Can I come in the studio with you?" When I used to do this show in Buffalo, um, taking my grandkids, especially my two older grandsons, with me to do the show was something that we did on a regular basis. Of course, they were more interested in going to Denny's afterwards and having ice cream, but that's there's less of that now that we've got our own show here. Which, by the way, I gotta mention that. Okay. um, this is today. This show number, and we've been trying to get used to numbering the shows. So if anybody wants to look it up, this is show number 200. Now, it's not the 200th total show that we've done, but it's a 200th show that we've been doing here in our own studios. Now, of course, those numbers started ratcheting up a little faster when we started doing 2 shows a week. But we've done 200 shows here in the studio, 200 Let's Talk Native shows, and and I'm quite proud of that. And obviously, usually when I thank our sponsors in the second portion of the show, I talk about the fact that we are in our eighth year. But we are not only in our eighth year of doing Let's Talk Native. We're actually, this is again our 200th show here in our own studio, and it's something that again I'm thrilled to death that I still have the support that I need to be able to do these shows, and of course do the show I do in New York. In New York, I'm in my fourth year down in New York City, doing my program down there, and that's a 2-hour show with talkback and all that stuff. So couldn't do it without the support, but again, this is an anniversary, or at least a milestone of sorts, our 200th show. So I want to mention that as well. All right, let me get back to what I really want to talk about. So if you didn't know, and I'm going to assume that more people know about the correlation between snow snake and the Guyana Goa, for instance, than perhaps engage it in a conversation. It's not widely talked about, but I was just speaking to my friend Degarundage just the other day, and this subject came up, and my good friend Aguirre Rayando, or people know him as Sugar Montour, we talked about this on a show years ago about the correlation between snow snake and the raising of Rurionisu, or what people call Rorion, or chiefs, and the whole relationship. So let me kind of explain it in some of the most basic terms, and then we'll circle back around. Guyana Goa, and I know that's pronounced different ways in different languages, but in Mohawk it's Guyana Goa. It oftentimes people call it the Great Law of Peace. That's not what it translates to. What it actually translates to is a great, good way. Again, not the best description. Sounds a little bit redundant, or a great path. And so it's great, and that's what Goa is, and it's a good path. So it is, and that path, or that way is about using a process that goes in a certain direction to resolve conflict, to address the day-to-day decisions that we make, how we work as a society. So that's what that way is, that path is. I mean, when we talk about Haudenosaunee or Haudenosaunee, we talk about the people of the way of the longhouse, not the people of not just people who build these things or live in these things, or the people of them, but the people of the way of the longhouse. So it always is about a way, or a path, or a direction, right? There's direction, there's flow. There's flow from the past to the present to the future that is oftentimes intertwined into our language. So when we say Guyana Goa, we're talking about a path. And that path has been established by the millions of people who came before us. Those millions of feet walking in a direction that have again made this path for us to follow. So when we talk about Guyana Goa, we're talking about the path, the direction. Now, snow snake involves creating a path for the snow snake to travel in. So we take a log and we drag it, or or whatever. We use some sort of form to create this channel in the snow. And in the very beginning of the snow snake, we actually build up a bank, so it's elevated a little bit, and the walls to that channel that we're going to launch that snow snake down, the walls might be a little bit higher, because when we hurl that projectile, that snow snake, if the walls aren't, if that path isn't defined enough, then the snow snake flies out of the it flies out of the channel. Now that's the path. Now let's talk about the snow snake. The snow snake, which is essentially a very finely crafted instrument, projectile, with painstakingly carved and treated, made, be sure to use the straightest grains, of the tree to craft this thing. It is finished in a way so it'll maintain that integrity, that straightness. It is given. We put weight on the front end of it. Now we use lead and we shape the lead. So it is a finely crafted. It is something that we put our energies into, and we create something. We create an instrument that we can direct, that we can give our power to, but it has no power by itself. Snow snake has no engine to it, no jet engine or snow tracks associated with it. It isn't a snake. It isn't a living creature that will project itself. It relies totally on the people to take that snake and project it down that path. So that snake is like our Dionysus, our Roriana, our chiefs. And again, I use that last word because it is the least descriptive. I mean, in our language, that Dionysus or that Roriana, what it means is that he has a path. See, it's all connected. So when we play this game is a symbol of our lives. It's a symbol of what we do and how we painstakingly do create these instruments, these fine instruments. And it's the same thing we do with our children. We see, just like we identify the straight grain of this tree, of this wood, and we know that it has potential, right? We see it. We know. We look for just the right sapling. We look for just the right source, the right raw material that we know that we can fashion into this thing. And it's the same thing. We look at our children, and we see that child, whether it's a male or female, because there are positions within our system, within our culture, that we know women are placed into positions of responsibility, not authority, positions of responsibility, and the men are too. And some of them are clearly defined titles, but even without those titles, within our communities, we identify people with leadership qualities, with diplomacy qualities, with teaching qualities, athletic qualities, singing qualities, dancing qualities, storytelling. We identify all that stuff. But specifically, these instruments that we, the people, are going to project down this path, we shape those people. And we participate in the development of those people. We participate in such a way that when it is time to launch that snow snake down that path, we know that the snow snake has been fashioned to the best of our ability to do the task that we are asking of it, which is to be projected down that path and to go as far as the power that we're going to give it. No farther. I mean, it's only going to go as far as we can project it. Now, let's talk about that power that we give it. Because even that power is reined in. You can be as strong. I mean, you may be able to throw a rock through a brick wall. But if you can't temper the power that you give that snow snake, even with a finely fashioned channel, you could recklessly throw the thing and it'll still fly out. I mean, not only fly, it could bury itself into the wall. It could it could fly. You could break it. You could break the snow snake if you try. If you don't take into consideration how much power and the skill with which you give it that power, then you may not accomplish your goal. So we are the people. We are the ones who project that instrument down the path. Now, as I say this, you may not know if I'm talking about the snow snake or if we're talking about the Runionisu, because it's almost interchangeable. So if you attend a snow snake tournament, if you go to one of these matches, I think the thing to do is to watch it and watch the symbolism and draw back that metaphor. When you see somebody who is powerful and is going to give that power to this projectile, to this instrument, know that we can be very powerful people and we can direct people badly. That's the metaphor. The beauty of the snow snake game is not just the athleticism, not just the competition, but the symbolism of it all. Again, I'm grateful to have had this conversation with Dego Rundige just a couple of days ago, and to be reminded of the first time that I really heard this story. I mean, I'll admit, I didn't know. I mean, when I was a teenager, I didn't know what snow snake was. I didn't know what it was until I was an adult. But to hear, and I don't know how many years ago, but it was a good 5 or 6 years ago that I heard Aguirre Ando explain that correlation. And obviously, just like I heard it from him, he heard it from people before him. This is that whole idea that, look, if you don't believe what I'm saying is true, then that's your right not to believe it. But this is the way it's been explained to me. And see, this is the way we perpetuate the stories, the culture, the meaning of it all. Not everybody who's going to pick up a snow snake and go to a competition is going to fully embrace that metaphor and understand that even as a powerful competitor, you have a responsibility on how hard, the skill with which you set it on, set that snake into the path. Because again, if you throw it too wildly, too much into the side of that channel, too hard towards the edges of those paths, you can knock it off that path. You can destroy a snow snake. If they've been broken, they do get broken. They also can be abused. They can be left out. They can be not stored properly. They cannot be not cared for properly. They cannot be examined after use. And they could be put in places in ways that they become bent, warped, where they become less useful. They can age. They can rot. You leave it in a place, and all of a sudden, we've got ants chewing on it. We have crawling creatures that get to it. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Because that's the issue. We can get to that place where we may have had a finely crafted instrument, but we let it go bad because we don't give it its care. Again, am I talking about a snow snake or am I talking about a chief? Now, we can take this conversation beyond the Guyana or Goa, because let's face it, we live in communities, and there's non-native communities that have governance issues. That same metaphor works for anybody that you've placed some responsibility upon. And I don't say authority, because again, that snow snake has no power by itself. The only power it has is what we give it. So, whether you're living in Depew or Buffalo or New York City, and you have allowed somebody, and I guess being allowed isn't even the word, but if you have placed a responsibility on somebody that you think has been shaped Whether you believe it or not, and when you elect somebody, when you select somebody to carry your voice, to represent you, whether it's in a city council, whether it's in a state legislature, or whether it's in U.S. Congress, or whether it's in the UN, it is important that we understand that we have a responsibility to maintain how we have shaped that messenger, that vessel that's going to carry our power, not their own. Now, that abuse of that power, see, in Snow Snake, the snake itself can't abuse the power. The real metaphor in Snow Snake is what we do as we yield and provide that power to the Snow Snake. It puts the burden and the responsibility on us to maintain that instrument, to maintain it. Because we always hear about the abuse of authority. And I have a saying that I used to say often. The best way to prevent the abuse of authority is to not give it. So, if you fashioned a snow snake and you realize it has flaws, if you realize that you can't keep it straight, no matter how many times you try to reshape it, no matter how many times you lacquer it or polish it or shape it or sand it or put it in, wet it and dry it, no matter how many times you do it, it just won't stay straight, then don't give it any power. Put that one aside. Take that one out of your inventory. Now, again, am I talking about a snow snake or am I talking about a representative carrying your voice? It almost doesn't matter. See, this is the beauty of so many aspects of our culture. And I know I don't do enough of this on my show. I don't talk about these things enough on my show. And, that's why having guys like Matt and Degarundige, Paul Delarone, and Sugar Montour, Aguirre Ayando, having these people who sometimes remind me that, you should do this. I mean, I had, something said to me recently that was both painful to hear on one level, but complimentary at the same time. It was extolled to me on how unfortunate it is that I'm not proficient in the language, because I can communicate in English so well, and I understand native concepts. As when I have the chance to sit with somebody who is skilled in the language, it's not hard for me to wrap my head around. And I know there's a metaphor. It's not hard for me to understand. It's not hard for me to grasp the idea. That's the value of the language. So I go back to my friend in Hawaii. That's the value of having that language. Now look, you can have the language and still do wrong. But part of it is forgetting or neglecting what goes into those words, neglecting our responsibility to understand that those people who came long before us have given us something so valuable. And look, as I say in the opening, I don't give buffalo speeches, and I don't talk about spirituality. I'm not a prayerful person. The language was not a gift from the Creator, in my opinion. That's not the way it's explained to me. The language came from a skillful people, a people who understood, and they used and they selected elements of nature and life to create words that could take on other meanings. This is the skill that our people... Snow Snake, it was not a game that was a gift from the Creator. It was a very skillful people who created a game that would be a symbol of our lives. I know when we talk about lacrosse, we say it's the Creator's game. Look, there is no problem with playing lacrosse and doing it within the spirit of acknowledging the power of creation. That's a great thing. But it was a very intelligent people who developed these aspects of our culture the ceremonies, the dances, the language, the games, the stories. The reason I try not to over spiritualize our existence is because who we are as a people is not born out of supernatural origins. Quite to the contrary. It's born out of everything that is natural. Everything that creation has given us as a means to teach us about every aspect of our lives. Hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour, actually a little past that. Sometimes I can get caught up. So we'll take a break here, and we'll come back with a little bit more, and we'll dissect this a little more. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
If you're drinking that water, red blues, red blues, red blues, baby, red blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues, all right. My job, my woman left. She took her out of my step. She left town with my best friend. If that wasn't enough, she took my dog and my guitar too. And all she left me was a case of the blues. Red blues, red blues. Red blues, baby, red blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues, red blues, red blues, baby, red blues. got raised blues. Got those reservation blues, baby.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Look, we have been experiencing a few problems with our Facebook live stream. I use a special camera for what we're doing here. It's called a Mevo, and it is designed specifically for streaming live on Facebook and other platforms. And we started experiencing some problems last week. Apparently, they have a glitch in the system that where the camera's ability to communicate with Facebook was troubled. So we spoke with the folks from Livestream, which is the company that produces the Mevo camera. Came up with a bit of a workaround, but it appears that we only got about half the show in before our live stream ended. You know, all of our indication on our instruments say that we're still running live, but I see as I'm monitoring us on Facebook that we may not be. So we are experiencing some trouble. I apologize. I should have apologized in advance. It was my intention to do that. So bear with us. We will post a video up on Facebook and on YouTube immediately as soon as we can, and so you'll get a chance to watch the show in its entirety. But you can go to www.ltnradionet.com and hear the whole show. And of course, I'll post the audio up, the SoundCloud audio up immediately after the show as well. So, for any of you who were watching, and of course, if you were watching and it's your only way of catching the show, you're not catching anything I'm saying right now. So, but we will make the show available to you. And again, I feel like this subject matter is important and it's relevant. It's relevant not only for the season, because this is the season of snow snakes and snow snake competition. We've got probably some great weather still yet ahead for these competitions, and when given a chance to have our children, especially our children, participate in witnessing and playing the game, it is good. It would be great if we could relay this this way of viewing the game. So. But look, let me take just a minute here. I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, my good friend Ed Schindler, who has given us so much of his time in this show. We're on our 200th show, and he's been a big part of many of those. But he also contributes and helps sponsors, some of what we do here. So. Again, we wouldn't be able to do things, even sometimes fight with new equipment like this camera, if we didn't have the support from individuals like Ed Schindler and my friend Cynthia Trice and Neville Spring, who has done so much. As I'm sitting here, in front of me is my MacBook, which was a gift from Neville several years ago that I use still today. So there's so much that the people have contributed to help us do this show, not just provide me the funding to be able to travel and do the things that I do there, but the very things that we utilize to do the show. My good friend Sugar Montour, who I've spoken much of in this program, who supports what we're doing here. The Seneca Nation has even contributed, showing some of their appreciation for some of the advocacy that I've done for them. So. Everybody who's helped the show, not only who currently helps the show, but who's helped us do this in the past, you have all allowed us to educate, entertain, and inform. For now, into our 8th year. I think all of you, past and present, who have supported the work that I do here and the platform that I've tried to develop here. I thank you all for joining in the fight and for doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I want to thank CKWE, the Gwe and Tandanega for broadcasting, rebroadcasting, simulcasting this show. I want to thank Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying the program on your networks. And of course, all of you who share the show, including my wife, who shares this show on many of the other Facebook group pages. But those of you who share the SoundCloud, the audio that I post on SoundCloud after the show, and those of you who take the time to check out the videos on YouTube and share those videos, I thank all of you for doing that, because the whole idea, the gift that we have of communication, which isn't social media. It's just the ability to speak and have conversations. That lies at the core of why I do this. I say, let's talk. Let's talk native. Let's talk native culture. Let's talk native language. Let's talk native politics. Let's talk native advocacy and activism. Let's talk all of that. But let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's take our thoughts and our beliefs, the things that have been relayed to us, and let's take those teachings and turn beliefs into knowledge and understanding. Let's apply it. Let's apply it in our conversations. Let's apply it in our actions. The beauty of something, what I'm talking about here today, of something that can be so demonstrative, like a sports competition, whether it's lacrosse or in this case, snow snake. A game that requires, a competition that requires a great deal of skill. On the face of it, it sounds pretty simple. You take a stick and you throw it down a channel in the snow. But it isn't simple. It is a very refined through many generations. It is a game and a skill that has been handed down generation after generation after generation, and one that, again, that has implications in who we are as a people. It's also a testament to this being a sport that we play in the winter, when this is the time of the year that we rejuvenate, right? This is the time that, some are the great animals that we watch and observe and learn from. They hibernate. They take their time to renew themselves for the upcoming year. We'll be facing, in fact, I think a couple of territories may have even started midwinters already. But spring isn't the renewal. Winter is the renewal. Spring is the evidence of that. It's what comes after that renewal. That is when, the creation starts demonstrating itself from this sleepy period that is winter, where the nights are longer and the days are shorter. But to have this gift, not from the Creator, not from creation, but from the phenomenal people that have come before us, this gift of this game, this competition, this activity that can teach us so much about life. Man, what a tremendous thing. What a tremendous thing to take something like this competition and to be able to relate it to how we interact with people that we have fashioned through their entire lives, to be able to carry our voice, to be able to take the power that we give it and perform its task. I mean, it's an incredible metaphor, and it's not an accidental one. That's one of the things that I will say. The words that we've developed in our language, they weren't just arbitrary, grunts and and machinations with our mouths to fashion. There's a reason that we've shaped the language in the way that we have. There's a reason that we give the sounds to the words. And when you can talk to somebody, I have the great fortune of having somebody like Dagarundege or Ganazarag or other folks from Mohawk communities that can explain these things in such a way that make it so the language isn't just another way of saying something. It's a different way. It is a way of relating the way we communicate to the very essence of our history and our culture. So when you take that language that is no accident, fashioned by people who came before us, and then we think about that, and we think about things like this game, the snow snake game that we play during this season. And it is such an opportunity to not only learn a skill, an athletic skill, but that athleticism isn't just about the one who throws and who hurls that snow snake down through that snowy channel. It's the craftsman that goes in, the craftsmanship that goes into fashioning that snow snake. It's the skill set and the craftsmanship that goes into fashioning the channel. And you rarely, or I mean, you will never go to a snow snake competition where every one of those snow snakes was fashioned by the same person, or that the channel was created by one person alone. It's a community. It's a participation thing. And in fact, that channel doesn't just get created once and then it's done. If it's going to be reused or even through the course of a competition, it's something that's got to be maintained and taken care of, sturdied up, fixed, fashioned. That path has to be maintained. That channel has to be maintained. You know, we hear other, expressions, other metaphors, I guess, when we talk about somebody having gone off the rails. Of course, you can think about that in terms of perhaps a train derailing. But, when we take that snow snake and we put our might behind it, and if we have, one, not maintained that path, and two, let those snow snakes deteriorate. And I would argue we're guilty of both of those things right now when it comes to Guyana de Goa. We don't do these recitals. We've been spending a few years doing, retelling the story of the peacemaker. That is not understanding the process. How does a issue get presented into a council? Who receives that issue? And is it received the same when it comes from outside of that community, outside that, the clan system? These are all simple answers to come. But I'll tell you, there's some questions that I've asked, some simple questions that I've asked that I've not been able to get answers to. And these are some of the basics, the foundations of that Guyana de Goa. So while we have some great skill sets in terms of creating that path for the snow snake, I'm afraid that we've neglected that skill set in maintaining that path, that great, good path that is the Guyana de Goa. We haven't maintained it. We haven't done it justice. We haven't taken the time to make sure that that path that we're supposed to follow, that everybody's aware of it. We're not just arbitrarily throwing people down and giving people our power in any haphazard way, helter-skelter. But that's what we've done. So as I talk about snow snake, as I talk about the discipline, and again, I'm not talking about, something that is unnatural, even though, the snow snake is fashioned by man, and the channel is fashioned by man. It is fashioned hand in hand with nature. We don't play snow snake in the summertime. We need the seasons. We need creation to provide us the right conditions to even do these things. So I think it is so important. It is so valuable that we understand these skill sets that go into something like a game, a competition, something that we can get real serious about, but something that we do for enjoyment. And yet, we've neglected what that game symbolizes. We've neglected that path. We've neglected those instruments that we're supposed to shape to travel that path. I'm encouraged by this time of year. This is a time of year for renewal. And I guess snow snake game is a perfect symbol of that, because we have to renew that path every year. Sometimes, every winter we have to recreate that path over and over again, and sometimes even through a season, we might have to recreate it. We have to fashion it all over again. But we do it with a skill set. We do it with a purpose. I've never seen anybody who just takes a handful of snow snakes and goes and starts just throwing them. You can go over on a frozen pond with no channels. You can take those things. You just skirt them across the ice, and they'll sail with no direction, and not even necessarily the direction that you intend to toss it in. No guarantee it'll stay straight. Not without that channel keeping it straight. There needs to come a time that we give some real diligence and vigilance to fashioning that path. Now, and again, I'm speaking of Guyana to Goa, but you know what? Whatever that system of governance that you use, you need to make sure that it's working properly. And I'm not just saying following the written laws that you fashioned, but is the process working? If you're electing the orange guy into the White House, how'd that work out? Did that system work? If you're seeing an elected system that is corrupted by a few powerful people, so now it's not a path that we're all following. It's not a path that's made available for all of us. It's just a power that has been holed up in a few. If we have allowed there to be an abuse of authority, whether it's in a longhouse or whether it's in council chambers or whether it's in the state legislative building or whether the halls of Congress, if we've allowed that abuse of authority, it means that we haven't laid down the parameters that we expect people to operate within. We haven't created that path. Now, I'm less concerned about the systems of others, although we are impacted by it. But the first thing I need to check up is what are we doing? What are we doing to fix our path? What are we doing to clean our own house? Look, we can fashion a great environment for a snow snake game. And you know what? We even have tools now that we didn't have. Man, we can come up with a little, ATV 4-wheeler, and we can plow a snowbank, and we can come in here with power tools and instruments we have tremendous tools to help us create a great snow snake competition. We can install bleachers beside our snow snake trails. We've got power tools to help us shape and craft our snow snakes. We have all these great tools. But you know what? We have all these great tools to fashion the path that we follow in life, too. We have great tools at our disposal. We have communication tools. We have the ability to communicate with thousands of people in a moment. Now, I'm not saying that we should turn the Guyana to Goa into a Facebook app or a YouTube channel, but we certainly have the ability to gather voices. We have technology that should help us, and yet yet we seem to be more distracted by it than putting it to use. We can travel hundreds of miles in a couple of hours. We used to not be able to get from community to community the way we used to. We can put out the call and have hundreds of men show up in a moment's notice if we need that, if we need people to show up. We don't do it often enough. Well, we can. So, enjoy the season. Our midwinters, we call them ceremonies, but they're festivals. These Thanksgivings are festive occasions. And the games we play, lacrosse, snow snake, peach stone. These games all have meanings to them. I wanted to spend this hour explaining the meaning that Snow Snake has, and hoping that as we witness this game, and we witness those skillful players of this game, that we take a message out of that, and we take it home, and we take it to heart, that all of that skill, all of that preparation is the same thing we need to do for our lives, not just for the competition. That's my message for the show. Look, I want to thank you for listening. I know we did have some Facebook live stream issues, and we'll put the video up as soon as we can. I think this was an important show, and I hope you'll share it. And of course, we'll get the audio up. Well, that's what I'll do. Immediately after the show, immediately after I post the audio up on SoundCloud and I share it on my pages. So that's what we'll have. So again, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for supporting the program. We'll be back here on Monday. Now I'll go on.
Blast from the past. Do you hear my engine roar? I'm a blast from the past. Just let that engine roar. And when you hear me coming, I'll have that pedal on the floor. Them northern lights are cold. They're telling me to come on home. The howling of the highway just keeps me moving on. This 53 is winding. She keeps